So before we get on with today, I'm just going to do a little bit of an advert really for what we're going to do next week, just in case you haven't booked for next week. Perhaps I can entice you to come and join. And if you have already booked, just to give you a bit more of an idea of what we're going to be doing. So you have all received, I believe, a little 10-page handout, and that always sets out what we're going to be doing. So next week, with Valentine's Day around the corner, I thought we would make a little Valentine's sign. So there's not going to be much in the way of flower arranging. And as you know, those of you who follow me, I do love a sign around the house. Anything that sits still long enough gets painted with a chatty motto on it. But I understand that might not be your cup of tea. So don't let me put you off joining. There's always a bit of chat. There's always something you might think, oh, actually, I don't quite want to do the project as Julie did it. I might adapt the technique. So this next week is going to be a little more of the craft side of things rather than the flower side of things. So in the handout, I've given you actually a copy of this picture here. And this is taken from one of my old flower arranging magazines, which, as I look at it, 2015, so I've had it for quite a while. And it's a little sign in an orchard, and it's pointing, and actually it's someone's birthday. It's Julietta's birthday, and every time I look at that sign, I think it's got my name on it. So we're going to make a little sign, and it's the words I'm interested in. So what you'll need for next week is something to make your sign on. So you'll need to do a little bit of prep in advance. I am going to be using this wooden block, which I bought from the charity shop, must have been last autumn, because on the front somebody has added a reindeer, and I thought I might put that up at Christmas. I never did. So I'm going to scrape all that off, and I'm going to paint my sign using some craft acrylic paints, basically, so I've got a plain background. It may be that you haven't got a piece of wood to hand. Perhaps you've got some cardboard boxes from all your online deliveries, and you might want to cut out a shape there. You might even want to glue two sections of card together to make it really sturdy. You might not want to paint your card. Perhaps you want to leave it blank if you just get the brown cardboard bit, not all the logo bits. Or it may be that perhaps you've got some nice wrapping paper or something like that, and you want to cover it up. But we're going to make a scrolly sign. So it may be you want to write out the name of your Valentine, or you might want to write out something that says love or joy or hope or whatever inspirational message you want to use. And I'm going to be using, you've got two options. Number one, if you're a flower arranger already, you may have some of this in your toolbox, which is aluminium wire, and it bends. So I am going to be writing out my message with aluminium wire. And I'm going to be using a pair of pliers, a bit like, you know, the game at the carnival where you have to go round and round without it buzzing. I'm still going to be using that action to make, with one piece of my wire, this flowing sign. Now, if you don't have that to hand, you could use string, so hot glue gun, and we can be gluing your text direct onto your board, and then you could be layering string on, or perhaps it might be chunky wool, or perhaps some ribbons, something like that. If you're really into the action, it may be that you might have some of this wire, and you decide to wrap it with wool to begin with, so you get the movability, the malleability of the wire, but you get a bit more textural interest. So it is going to be a craft-based project, but if you do want to add flowers, you'll have noticed in the picture, it had a little test tube on the side here, and we did use test tubes last week. So we will get a floral flourish in there, but it's entirely up to you. It may be as well, you might want to add love hearts, so it's entirely up to you. So just that's a quick thing about next week. So I'll just move those bits out of the way. And for those of you who missed class last week, we made little mixed media frames. So that was a canvas frame, and you can see I mentioned test tubes, so you may already have your test tubes from last week, which were added in, and we just sort of did a little bit like that. And the work that you've shown me has been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed watching how you've been interpreting the brief from last time. And really, I think they're all sort of year round, aren't they? You know, I've had these propped up as works of art, so I've been really enjoying looking at those. And actually, they've gone down quite well with my family as well. So enough about last week, enough about next week. Let's talk about what we're going to do today. So I am going to be doing a Frosty arrangement. So the first thing I'm going to be using just to frighten you off a little bit, I'm all full of frightening messages today. Water pearls. So I bought these water pearls years and years ago, and I don't know whether you've got water pearls in your kit, whether you've been managed to buy them, but you do need to look at the instructions. So this kit here is a 20-gram packet, and if I put all the pearls into made it all up, I would have needed a litre of water. And then the shock horror, I didn't read the small print until last night, that my beads took 5 to 6 hours to hydrate. So if you just need to check your wording on your beads if you have got them. Some of them seemed, I'm sure I remember them being instant when I've bought some previously. So I've already made up some of my water pearls ahead of time, and I end up with something that is so fantastically tactile. It's like frog spawn. And I will say that if you drop it on the floor, it's impossible to pick up again. But it's absolutely, just gorgeous. You could just spend whole class just working, holding, fiddling with that with your hands. So it's really nice to use. But the big question is, well, how many of these beads do you make up? But I think when mine said add a litre of water, I would say that would have made a litre of beads. So I used 1/4 of a jar on mine, and it's made, I haven't measured it, but I'm guessing that looks about 1/4 of a litre in the bottom there. Now, if you haven't got these beads, you're thinking, oh my goodness, what's going to go wrong? I can't do the project for today. Well, number one, just sit back and relax and watch. But number two, I have got a couple of adaptations for you. One is you could do the same project, but use conventional potting compost, because we're going to be using spring flowering bulbs. So I've just put some potting compost into I had a charity shop find, and I've got some moss that I've left over for Christmas, so I will show you how to do that in a while. And then over here, also something left over from Christmas, I had a pillar candle in here and some Christmas greenery, and it says merry and bright. But at the bottom here, I've got some pearl barley, and you could use this instead of the little Frosty pearls there. So and perhaps you don't have pearl barley, maybe you've got rice, and you can sort of adapt the technique and have rice. So it's entirely up to you. It's sort of a springboard of ideas. So if you've got everything that I've suggested you bring along, work with it. But if you need to adapt, there are different ways that you can adapt and change the project to suit you. So as well as those bits and pieces, I've also got a decorative container that I'm going to use. So let me bring that across. I've got a few things to show you here. So I'm going to be using this little sundae glass. So by coincidence, that many beads fits quite nicely into my sundae glass. There's a word of warning though, or just things to be aware of, that as we arrange, my glass isn't very deep. So I'm going to have to very carefully add in my little twigs I've got and my little flowering bulbs, and then they're not going to stay up of their own accord. If you want to have something that's got a bit more structural stability, you might want to have a container that is much deeper, and therefore fill it up with your beads, and they will hold up your plant materials much more easily. So again, I can't really advise on how big a container is, how many beads you need, but the smaller and shallower your container, the trickier potentially it is to get everything to stand upright. But don't worry about it. If it all falls over, that's a learning experience in itself. So I'm going to stop my materials falling over by adding in a few extra items, which are a bit of a surprise item. And again, don't panic if you don't have these to hand. Number one, I've got cocktail sticks, or you could use kebab sticks, or if you are a flower arranger, you may have floristry wires. And I might use my cocktail sticks to push into my bulbs and help them stand up that way. If you have flower foam, you might want to have a tiny square of flower foam so that you can insert your bulbs into a medium. Now, if you're panicking now, perhaps you've even got some polystyrene from the packaging from all your online shopping, or perhaps even some cardboard that you could layer up and shape together. And if all else fails, kitchen foil. So I could crunch up a ball of kitchen foil, take a cocktail stick. This just is very simply push cocktail stick into bulb, push like that. So you can see that I could have that in my bowl and it would stand, but you just need to be very careful with the balance. So if you feel that your arrangement is falling around, you might need something solid underneath all your water pearls just to hold it together. But just bear in mind, we're making something that's quite simple. It doesn't have to be over the top. It could just be one little twig you found and one little bulb that you may well have dug up from your garden. So don't think we're going to have to make something, you know, pedestal size. It's going to be a little arrangement, and it's the art of being immersed in something creative rather than necessarily what the end result is. So if you wanted something that was picture perfect, you could either just enjoy looking through a magazine, or you go out to your high street florist and pay them to do something that was picture perfect for you. So this is all about the creative process. If it goes wrong, it doesn't matter. You just had a nice time being immersed in an activity and enjoying it. So I have got those extra items, and the other extra thing I've got, if you are a flower arranger, you may recognize one of these. It's a metal flower frog, and probably for today, that is what I'm going to hide under my beads. And you quite often find these in charity shops, but if you are interested in those, I can send you a link to somewhere where you can buy them. So I've got in front of me, I've got my container, I've got something to hide my beads under, I've got my little beads, and then in terms of the decorative materials, I have dug some bulbs out of the garden. So these, I seem to recall, are painted pate, which are the mini daffodils, and I've also got some narcissi as well, some paper whites, and I have dug them up this morning, and I have washed the roots. So I've just shook the soil off and I've washed them, and I might need to clean them a little bit, and I've got a bowl of water off on the side to show you how I'm going to do that. And then off to the side as well, I've got my floristry scissors. I've got some eggs. It's a little bit too early for Easter, but just to show you how you can change this from a, you know, a wintertime arrangement to something that will look beautiful on your table at Easter time. I have been up in the loft to get some eggs. I've got some little dishes here, little metal ramekins that my mum gave me. I thought I'd show you something with those afterwards, sort of thinking about how you're going to put your arrangement together and what you might have around it. And then I have got some gingham ribbons because I thought they look lovely in spring light. I've got pink, yellow and green. So I might have used those. I may or may not use those. And off to the side, I've got some candles, but more about that later. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring on my side camera and have it over my working area, so you can see exactly what I'm going to do and the steps I take to make the arrangement. So if you have got any questions, use the chat box, and I can answer them as I go along. And if I miss your question because I'm concentrating on two screens at once, don't worry about it, because when I take off the when I finish the recording afterwards, everyone will be unmuted and we can have another chat then. And then as we work, we can adapt the techniques according to what materials you have got. So bear with me a moment as I stand up and scrape my chair across, and I will bring in my other camera. I'm going to put working on our kitchen table, which normally has a cloth on it, and I'm going to just put an old muslin down to hopefully collect the worst of any dirt and whatever that I'm going to have. So I have got my little bowl here. Again, it's a charity shop find. I love charity shopping. Pressed glass, a little bit of dimpled around the edges. So I am immediately going to start with my little pin holder. And if you didn't see it earlier, that is what it looks like. So this is a vintage one that was given by one of the ladies at my flower club. It's got a heavy weight at the bottom and these prongs. So I'm putting that in the bottom of my container. So if you've got a piece of flower foam or a piece of polystyrene, or even your scrunched up piece of tin foil, that would be quite handy to have at the bottom, because it will just give you a solid base. Bear in mind though that my pin holder here is weighted and the piece of aluminium tin foil isn't, and it still may slide around. So you might want to make this just with your pearl beads to begin with. See how you get on, and then if you want some more structural support, think about adding in a bit of polystyrene or a piece of the tin foil. So that's just a workaround really. So when you come to make your beads, as I said before, you need to just check. Those are the beads I use, and then in tiny small print on the side there, it told me that I needed to add to the whole 20-gram bag, I don't think that's in focus, it's tiny anyway, a litre of water. So you will need to have decided how big your container is as to how much of the beads you need to make up. So I've made mine up ahead of time, and thank goodness I did. And as I pour them in, let's have a look. They are just absolutely gorgeous. They are really tactile. So it might be a good sensory experience for any of you who are, you know, perhaps got children who need to be diverted. I think it's called ASMR, isn't it? When you play with things like this and you really have that experience of, you know, just enjoying. It's like playing with sand at the beach and watching it fall through your hands. So that is what I have got there. So I won't tip it too far. It looks like a bowl of sugar. If I tip it too far, they're going to fall out. But you can just see that shadow of the pin holder at the bottom. So what I'm going to do here, I've been collecting some sticks from the garden, and actually I'll show you what I've got. Some of them are sticks from the garden, and some of them are sticks that I bought last year from the supermarket. So the ones from the supermarket have fallen out first. These are silver birch twigs that have been sprayed, and they came from my local supermarket, and I used a few of them, and then I put them back in the loft thinking, I think they're a bit too garish for me. But actually, can you see it's been glittered a little bit, so it quite fits into the frosty look. So maybe you've got something like this around at home already. If you've got a garden or you've been on a walk, you may have discovered a branch of catkins, like I've got here. And also, for a flash of colour, I have got some cherry blossoms. So I'm not afraid to add in you know, dried with fresh with silk, so it's entirely up to you and what suits your mood and what you've got to hand, and the style that you've got at home as well. So I may well cut some of those pieces to add in as well, just for a bit of colour. At the moment, I will move them out of the way. So the first thing we need to do is decide how high we want our little arrangement to be. The higher you go, the more unsteady everything will become. And if you're going down the route of having your tinfoil ball in it, it's going to tip over. So this is trial and error. So let's start with something really easy. You could imagine, before I put in my bulb, so I have attempted to clean the roots. So after class, when we chat later, I will go through and clean a few more of them. But you could just to get the feel of it, will that bulb stay up and be supported in the glass dish on its own? And that single one, I think, is staying up, but you can imagine if I've got lots of other things in there, it's going to flop and move around a little bit. So this is why I've decided that perhaps I might want to poke a cocktail stick into the bottom of the bulb, and I always feels a bit drastic doing this, but it gives it a sort of a root, it anchors it down, and I can aim that either into my, I'm going to cut it down a bit shorter, into my piece of tin foil, or I can anchor it down so it gets caught into the piece of flower foam you might be using, or it's just getting wedged into the metal frog there. So that's one way of fixing. So, okay, thank you for bearing with me. Could we just have a wave of hands that you can hear me now? Oh, thank goodness for that. Thank goodness for that. So, in front of me, I've got my little dish, I've got my pin holder, I'm adding in my beads, trying not to get them to spin out everywhere. And my idea here is to create a little bit of height. So I have cut my piece of catkin, it's about a third higher than my little bulb here. So I can place that in there. And if you were using your piece of flower foam, or you were going to put your twig into your tin foil, you do exactly the same thing. It's slightly harder to do, so you might need to want to do a guide hole first of all with your scissors, but do to take care you don't cut yourself. So because my pin holder is weighted, it will stand up. If you were using something else, it may well wobble around a bit. So to get over the wobble, either use a deeper container, so you've got more of a volume of your beads, or to cut your material slightly shorter and don't go too overboard as to what you want to get in there. So I'm going to add 2 pieces of my little stem, and I will show you this. I'll hold it up at the end so you can see it straight on rather than looking down. So I've got one piece that's a little taller, one piece that's a tiny bit shorter, and then adding in my little daffodils, my tater-tate here. So I could just get that to balance, but it is a bit precarious. So again, I'm going to use my kebab sticks or my cocktail sticks, and if necessary, just trim them down to size and then add them in around the edge. So they will hold a little bit, but you just need to carefully think about your placements and not overpower it really. So here is my narcissi, my paper white, and the roots are a tiny bit dirty. So what you would do is get a bowl of water and swish it around. So when you've got more time to do this, you'll be making sure your roots are perfectly clean and tidy. But I'm going to add them in as mine are now, taking the kebab stick as well. And just poking it in, oops, like that. Thinking about the length, I'm probably going to have to cut it down because it's going to stand too proud because my dish isn't very deep. So I will cut that there and then start to add it in. So I'm creating a little, it's like I'm doing a little bit of a garden scene, a little bit of a fairy garden. And I'm going to leave my roots out, but if you don't like them showing, you could bury them a little bit and swish them down underneath. But it's supposed to be, the inspiration here is a little frosty morning, and that's what we're going to embrace. And it may be you've just got 1 or 2 bulbs, or you may have loads. You decide, but I would say this is a minimal pared back look really. So exactly the same thing, pushed my kebab stick into my bulb, and I'm putting 1 in the back as well. So I've by coincidence, I've got 3 placements. So florists and flower arrangers like working in 3s, but it's entirely up to you what you do. So they're sort of centered around that little area there, and you could add in more if you've got more. And you know, why not? I've got all mine in upright to begin with, but how about I come in and see whether, having got the balance right, I might want one that's off to the side. So it doesn't always have to be straight up and down. We're just creating a little bit of a garden area there. And you can see here, this is where my little eggs might come in. You know, I've got green and white here with the whitish bulbs and the green shoots coming up. I could continue that green on. And I've just got some little faux Easter eggs there that look quite natural looking, so I could place those in. Or you could go really glitzy, and then perhaps even with, if I'm going totally green, that I could even, if I take that one out, tie a little bow tie around one of my bulbs. And as long as I cut the tails of my ribbon quite short, so they're not going to get wet and drip into the water pearls, it'll look really quite pretty and attractive. So some little neat bow there, off on the side. And of course, I've kept everything green here. You might want to mix your colours up a bit so they're looking really fantastic. And a bit of, you know, added colour and glitz. So perhaps when I'm making Create With You later on, I will add in some more colours there, just to be a bit more, a little bit braver with my choices. Now, as I am going totally green for this one, perhaps a little bit of sparkle. So this will replicate the look with the, you know, that frosty morning look. And as I say, you're putting in as much or as little as you want to add. Now I have got the moss over there that I showed you earlier, you know, perhaps to get a bit more green, perhaps to cover up some of those roots if you don't like them. I could lay a little bit of moss on there. I would say not to put too much down here as a covering, because it is the pearl, the water pearls that are the star of this particular show. So don't feel that you need to cover it up. You need to imagine it's almost like you've got a frozen pond at home and you've just got this arrangement floating across it at the top. So that would be the one way of doing it. And you can imagine when these come into flower, they'll look beautiful. It's going to be in shades of the yellow tater-tate and the white narcissi. They will grow taller though. So at that stage, you will need to have a look at the balance. And if it's rocking over to one side, you may need to perhaps even think about putting it in a different container. But what I love about this time of year, the spring, it's all about the hope, isn't it? And what's going to happen in the future. And I will really enjoy watching that on my kitchen windowsill and seeing nature unfold in front of me. But if it does get a bit unwieldy, there's no harm in taking your arrangements apart and putting them into more stable containers. So that could just stand alone as is. But what if you don't have those water beads? What if you feel that your silver ball of foil isn't strong enough to hold the materials in place? Well, how about making it in a slightly different way? And you could go old school with this, really. So I've got my little dish here. It actually is a similar shape, a footed container, sort of an urn-style container with the compost. And then you could put in your moss at the top to cover the compost. It's not quite so attractive. And then you could add in your flowers on the top, so your bulbs. And again here, you can decide whether you want to show your roots off or whether you would like to go a little bit more traditional and have it more as a planted effect and have your bulbs put in a more sort of traditional way into your container. So again, you need to make sure you are watering those in and being careful with the roots. But this is just a mock-up to show you what it is that you could do. So imagine I'm adding more and more. I think I've got space for, let's go for number 3. So it's quite a large surface area to this container, so it will take quite a lot of bulbs. But then you could go back in again and you could start to do this idea with the twigs that you should be able to just push through the moss and they will hold steady. And this will be a better arrangement because as the flowers grow, they will start to grow through your twigs and the twigs will offer support. So that's quite a nice way of doing it. And in fact, if I was growing indoor hyacinth bulbs, which can get very heavy as they open out, you do need to have some sticks in there. So you could make your own little woodland garden in effect. And you've still got the opportunity for glitzing it up for Easter. That you could go through with your little balls and you could hang them on the little eggs, sorry. You could hang them from your trees, or you could just have them, scattered across the top surface. So that would be another way, a more conventional way of doing the same arrangement. If you like the sort of modern way of arranging, you haven't got the water beads, what you could do, I'm just going to put a few stray beads in there, take another bowl, put in I've got my weights here, your piece of oasis, your piece of rolled up tin foil, or how about we go back in with the pearl barley. So bear in mind, this is sort of being mocked up and it looks really good. But of course, there's no water source here. So it's one of these arrangements where it looks really great and it's not going to live very long, but you could do exactly the same thing here and perhaps really pare it back, and you could go with your twigs there, like an impale down on the top. I could go with my more colourful these like that, and sort of go for quite Chinese, isn't it, like that, quite pared back. And this is where my silk flowers, oh, I just dropped something there, my silk flowers come in, because obviously there's no water source here. I could come in and with a bit of extra pink with my wire cutters, and I could add in an extra flash of colour there, like that. So 3 ideas of how to get to the same sort of end point. We're celebrating spring, a frosty morning, and you can see how this would transition. Imagine those, you had little shells and you could have an arrangement like that for Christmas time. It would look absolutely fantastic. So how are you going to put these arrangements together to sort of have them as a tablescape running down your breakfast table or your Easter table? And what I'm going to do here is I'll bring you back to my face and I will show you a couple of ideas as to how you can put this all together, and you'll get a better look here rather than looking down on my table. So that is in the little glass dish, little Sunday dish. So very delicate, very light, and showing off the glass beads, so that the water pearl beads. You could use marbles for this as well, in which case you could put some water in, and it's surprising how well your spring bulbs will live, even though they've been slightly deprived of water. So I would say there's certainly enough moisture in these beads to keep your bulbs going, but I would every so often just check up on them to make sure they're not drying out. So you either want to dribble in a bit more water or to spray them a little bit. And where I added in that piece of moss at the side to cover it in, you can see that it totally changes the arrangement. And in fact, actually, I think I prefer it without. because I want to see the sort of lightweight effect of all the other components. So we're really showing off this sort of this frosty bit with the pearl there. I've kept my colours really limited with the greens, but when I might think my roots when we chat later on, and I might add a few more colours in there and go with the pinks and the yellows as well. And then probably, as we would more traditionally expect to have planted bulbs, the more conventionally in a dish, quite a chunky weighted dish here, so I can come up a little bit higher, and in fact it would look better with some taller materials on here. Sometimes if you have a squat dish, it looks very sort of bottom heavy, and you want to sort of stretch your eye up. So if you like a rule of thumb, I would say your dish could occupy about the bottom third of your placement, and you could come up perhaps even here, sort of 2/3. So you're notionally having a third at the bottom, 1/3 here and 1/3 at the top. I could bring my twigs into this height. And as the flowers grow, they're short to begin with, but they will grow up and they would look more of an arrange than a whole. So that's if you're interested in you know, the rules of flower arranging. Normally your container would occupy the bottom third, and then your flowers, your plant materials, would occupy the top third. But this is the one that's the safest arrangement to do, the one where you can guarantee the longevity of the plant materials. We haven't affected the roots at all. We haven't stuck kebab sticks or cocktail sticks at the bottom, so we can enjoy them indoors. And then when they finish flowering, I always replant mine outdoors as well. So that's the other option. And then close up, the option I showed you with the, you know, what do you do if you haven't got any of the water pearls? Well, you could make a dried arrangement. So here I have got some interesting sticks, and then my pretty, I put that in front of me so you can see the colours perhaps a bit better, you know, just a stem of my silk cherry blossom. So again, I could add more in, I could have another stem coming up, and then sort of continuing on with the pink theme as well. Now, if you wanted to put all these items together, on the side I have got my little ramekin cups. Clear my space a bit so you can see me, but you could do miniatures in those as well. So perhaps a bit of soil in there, perhaps just one of the bulbs that you've got, a little bit of moss in there. So it's almost like you would have perhaps several of these arrangements in your imaginary Sunday lunch for Easter. And then each individual person might have a little potted arrangement on the side. And if you don't like that idea, how about adding in some candles? And I've just got off to the side here. Some beautiful candles. And I've gone for candles here that are all different colours. So I'm holding up a pale pink, it looks white, but I've got blues, and I think that's a nice time of year. We get so stuck in, don't we, to having red candles or white candles and having them all the same. But with the Easter colours, those fresh, lovely spring colours, that I could add those candles in. Perhaps that one shows up a little bit more. I'll catch up with you later, Valerie. And what we do here is to soften up the bottom of the candle. You could soften that up with a flame and let it melt a bit, and then you would stick pushing that into the bottom of the cup. Well, I haven't got time to do that right now, and I will do that a little bit later on. But again, you could plant this. So if you had some of your wet compost, you could put your candle in there. You could do it into flower foam as well. But you do need to make sure that if you're going to light your candle, that your fixings are really firm. You don't want it suddenly falling over. So I'm sure I don't need to say it, but just do be really, really candle safe if you are thinking of adding in candles as part of your complete sort of tablescape. And of course, mentioning that if you decided you wanted to put a candle in amongst your flowers, that you would need to make sure, you can see here the burning flame here is level with this, that your candle needs to stand proud of what you are making. So it's just nice to add in, but just be ultra careful as well that you're not actually going to be creating fire hazard. So on that note there, I am going to say goodbye first of all to everybody who's watching on the recorded video, and I'll be topping and tailing it, so as everyone has watched live, I'll be editing out the bit at the beginning when we all said hello, and I'll be editing out the following bit which is where I will take you all off mute so we can have a question and answer session for those of you who do need to leave. And I know some of you are leaving because you need to get on with the rest of your lunch and back to work. But if you are able to stay, that would be lovely. And I can talk you through anything that you didn't quite get the hang of. If you wanted me to change something and show you how to do it more clearly, that is the purpose of the second half of the show, so to speak. So we will have a chat, and I'll have a look and see what materials you've got and whether you're going to have to adapt some of the techniques in order that you can get the sort of theme and the look of what we were after today. But of course, it's all about your interpretation. You can use what I'm doing now and sort of go off on another tangent and make your arrangements your own. So I'm going to stop the recording now, and then I will unpin my video, and then we'll have mic off, unmute you all, and then it's systems go as normal.